So we're saying we have an equation. That means you're going to have an equal sign in it. You're going to have a left side and a right side. And let's take an equation. 2 cosine theta minus 1 is equal to 0. The question, how do you solve that one?
See if it's true.
We're going to find a value that will make it true. That's what that means. Well, let me leave that problem for a second here.
Would be 2 times.
Well, let me just give you a different problem. If I said to you 2 times x minus 1 is equal to 0, how would you solve that?
You would remove
Add 1 to both sides, yes.
and divide by 2.
So you have 2x equals 1. You always want to solve for 1x, so what do? Divide by 2. X equals what? 1/2. We're going to do the same thing right here, just like we did there. We're going to take the minus 1 to the right side, either by adding 1 or when you move it from one side to the next side, what happens? You change the sign. Change side, change sign. When you have an equation, just remember that. Change side, change sign. Just check and see if I'm recording. Yes. Change sign. That's a quick way if you're adding and subtracting. You can't do the multiplications. So you'll have 2 cosine theta equals, we take the minus 1 there, it becomes a plus 1. Again, that's 2 times. To get rid of the 2, we're going to divide both sides by what? By 2, and you have cosine theta equals 1/2. Here's the difference between this problem and that problem. Here, I'm not looking for the cosine of theta, I'm looking for theta. So how do we find what theta is? Arc cosine, or pull your unit circle. There's my unit circle. Let's find which trig identity has a cosine equals 1/2. Remember, all stores take cash, right? Since your cosine is positive, that tells me look in this quadrant and in this quadrant. Don't waste your time here.
30 degrees.
So it is cosine's the first number, so it's pi over 3. They always like it in radian. So it's pi over 3, and there's 1 here. What's that one? 5 pi over 3. So theta equals pi over 3, comma, 5 pi over 3. It's 2 answers. Because there's 1. Did you say it would always be 2 answers? Unless they specify which quadrant. If they don't tell you which quadrant, you're going to have 2 answers. Actually, you have more than 2 answers because it'll repeat itself after that. But in the first cycle, you're going to have 2 answers. So that's how we're going to handle solving equations. First, we're going to treat them just like x, then go from there. I'll take another one. Is the answer to a quadratic equation always 2 answers? Or trig equation? The answer is no. You could have more than 2. So here's an example. Two cosine square x minus sine of x minus 1 is equal to 0. Now, I forgot to mention in the previous example, I said treat them just like x and do the math. I should also mention you always want to make sure you have one type of a trig function. So if you have sine, you really want to have sine if you can. All sines or all cosines if you can. So can I change that cosine to a sine? If you look on the board, we have a trig identity that says what? Cosine squared theta equals what? 1 minus, so there's a trig identity. Cosine squared theta equals 1 minus sine squared theta.
Those are connected by 2.
So there's a 2 in the front. That's okay. That's the trig identity I'm using. So here we go. 2 times. I'm going to replace the cosine with what? 1 minus sine squared. Minus sine of x minus the 1. Let's multiply that. 2 minus 2 sine squared x minus sine of x minus 1 is equal to 0. Can I combine the 2 and the minus 1?
Yep.
That would be what, plus 1? I honestly hate any quadratic equation that begins with a minus. I feel like I see that and I got a mental block. Oh no, I don't want to see it. To me, that's worse than onion soup. I hate onion soup. My wife loves it. I said, it smells like dirty socks. Yeah. But she loves it. Like, to me, that's as bad as that one. So what I'm going to do here to get rid of that minus sign, I'm going to multiply every one of them by minus 1. Because I don't like negative. What's minus 1 times a minus 2? Positive 2 sine squared x. What's minus 1 times a minus? Positive sine of x. What's minus 1 times a plus 1? Minus 1. What's minus 1 times 0? And I got rid of the minus. Now I'm happy. Now that onion soup becomes pasta fazool. I like pasta fazool. Yeah. Now I got to solve it. Again, when you see the sign like this, don't panic. Just say, you know what? Let me just look at this problem differently. What about if I let, just to make it easy on you, if I let y equals sine x, what will happen to that problem? If I do that, this problem will turn to what? 2y squared plus y minus 1 equals, I'm trying to get trig out of the picture. Just make it like algebra problem. If I replace sine of x with y, the problem will turn to this. Let's just, don't worry about this, solve this one. Maybe I'm loud. How do we solve this one? Don't we factor it first? So here we go. How do we factor this? 2y and y. It looks like plus 1 here, minus 1 here. Why? Because you want to make sure when you distribute that, that's minus 1y plus 2y. That'll give me what? The plus 1y. That's equal to 0. How do you solve this problem? I'm covering the trig. I don't see trig anymore. It's gone. We set each factor equal to 0 and solve it. So what is y equal to here? Negative 1. And what's y equal to here? Positive 1/2, right? Because you got to take the 1 there first and divide by 2. Now, so wait a minute. Oh yeah, I forgot. I let y equals what? Sine x. So now bring it back here. So now go back to sine of x. You have sine of x equals 1/2. And you have sine of x equals what? Negative 1. Where's my unit circle? Let's solve this one first. The sign is positive, which quadrant? 1 and 2. The sign is the second number. Where is the second number equals 1/2?
3rd degree.
Pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. Can you see him? Pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. sine equals -1. Sine is negative, has to be in the bottom. Where's the -1? Right there. That's the only one. Which angle? 3 pi over 2. So now we take all these answers, we put them next to each other. So the solution to that, x will have to be, I always like to put them from small to large, pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, and 3 pi over 2. By doing this little substitution, I think we made the math a little bit easier. We took it back to algebra 2. And when you finish with it, so just take y out, put sine x, and now let's look at the unit circle and see which angles are we talking about.
And you can do that all the time, right? You can just
Absolutely.
plug it in.
Yep, absolutely. Yes?
I have a question. When we change the 2 cosine squared x to 1 minus sine squared x,
Yes.
did we distribute the 2
Right here.
to that?
2 times 1, 2 minus 2 times that. That's this one. The 2 is only times this one, not that one, not that one.
Right.
So I did that right here.
What happened to the 2?
What's 2 minus 1?
Okay.
That's where the plus 1 came in. I collected like terms.
Okay, so it got rid of that
Yep.
2 in the front.
I just collected like terms. Yep. Let's try another one. Sorry, I was fine till about 20 minutes ago. I had runny nose. Now I got a headache and a little fever. So I hope I'm not getting anything. But it sounds like something might be coming my way. Yeah, it sounds like my nose is running. I can't stop, and I'm losing my voice. I can hear it. You know, it's like, wow, what happened here? Let's take this one. Let's solve. Four minus secant squared x equals 0. Secant. Remember, I'm going to be looking at my unit circle, and there's nothing on my unit circle about secant. So maybe I should switch that secant to 1 over cosine squared.
So in your calculator, there will be 20, and the A, B, C button is like a fraction.
I'm not really a fan of fractions. What do you think the best move here? What should we do? I don't like fractions. Which is what? Okay. Sebastian, I'll take that answer. Multiply everything by cosine squared x. Cosine squared x times 4 is what? 4 cosine squared x. Cosine squared x times 1 over cosine squared x. Cosine squared x times a 0. 0. Jennifer, was it you who said, can I do that all the time? So let me let y equals cosine squared x and see if I can solve that problem. I don't like trig. I'm trying to get rid of it. That becomes what? 4y squared minus 1 is equal to 0. Now, again, forget about the trig. There's no more trig. Just look right here. What can we do to solve this equation now? How do we solve it?
Move the 1.
Move the 1 there? Okay. Then divide by 4. I'll take that. I have no problem with any of these steps. How do we get y? It should be a plus or minus. Anytime you have something squared equals a number, it's always plus or minus the square root of 1/4, which is what? Plus or minus Is that 1/2?
Yeah.
So now bring in the cosines, because, bless you, that's really two problems when you look at it. It says y equals positive 1/2, and this one says y equals what? Negative 1/2. Now you don't like the y, let's bring in what y is equal to. So cosine squared x equals 1/2. Cosine squared x equals negative 1/2. Now let's stop and think for a second. The cosine square, something square is going to be a negative number. Do you know of anything when you square it beside I will be a negative value?
No.
No imaginary value. I'm not using I. I is not negative. But only I, the imaginary portion. So this can't be. You can't take a number and square it and still get a negative number. There's no solution to that. But let's look at that one. That says cosine squared x equals 1/2. That means take the square root of both sides. That means cosine x equals what? Plus or minus, always plus or minus, the square root of 1/2. Which is plus or minus 1 over the square root of 2. They probably don't like to see a square root in the bottom, so what do? Multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 2 to rationalize it. The radical of 2/2, right? Again, I get two problems here. It says cosine of x equals the positive, and the other one says what? Cosine of x equals the negative. Can we get what x equal to for both cases? Cosine, it's positive. Cosine in the first one, positive in the first and fourth quadrant.
45.
Let's look at this. Square root of 2/2 right here. Square root of 2/2 right here. Pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. The cosine is negative in these two quadrants. 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4. Can you see them? 3, that's the cosine, that's the sine, negative. 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4. Four answers. So I can say now x will have, I like to put them in order from small to large. Pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. 7 is bigger than 5, 5 is bigger than 3, 3 is bigger than 1. So I like to put my answer in increasing values. Those are the four angles that if you plug them in, the left side will go to 0. There are 4 of them for this example. Isn't this fun? Come on, look excited about this stuff. I love that stuff, by the way. To me, it's like, wow. Because you take this problem, you just go through it, and then, oh, there's the answer. You know? I find this stuff fun. Some people just like to work on cars, fixing things. That's not me. I like the math. Yeah. Let's try. Anyone still writing? We can try another one. If you're still writing, I'll let it sit for a few more minutes. Let's pick another one. There are some cases the calculator is not going to help you. I mean, unit circle is not going to help you. You have to use the calculator. We'll get to that shortly. I got this one, solve. I'm trying to mix different topics here. And I'm seeing you know what? I changed my mind. I see I can put two sections into one. Let's make it more fun. Sine 2x, sine of x, plus cosine of x is equal to 0. Again, I forgot to mention another part. Bless you. If this is x, you don't want to see 2x. They have to be matching. So if this is x, you want that to be x. You can't have 2x and x. You can't combine them. You can't do anything with them. So I got to look at my board here. It says sine 2x. Oh, I know I can write that what? 2 sine of x, cosine of x. Then there's still sine of x at the end, plus the cosine of x. So that's what I did. I took sine 2x and I wrote that 2 sine x cosine x. If I simplify this side, I will have what? 2 sine squared x cosine x plus cosine x. Can we factor anything out of this?
Let's factor the cosine.
Okay, factor cosine x out. If you factor cosine x, what's left? 2 sine squared x plus 1. Remember now, you're multiplying two things and you want your answer to be what? 0. The only way that will happen if what? If one of them 0 or both zeros. So let's set each one of them equal to 0 and solve it. Cosine x equals 0. The other one is what? 2 sine squared x plus 1 is equal to 0. Now, let's solve this one. Simplify that first. 2 sine squared x equals what? Negative 1. Or sine squared x equals what? Negative 1/2. Stop right there. You have something squared equals a negative number. Is it possible?
No.
No solution to this. That is not possible. When is the cosine going to be 0? Where's my unit circle? The cosine is the first number. Where's the cosine? It doesn't say which quadrant. Pi over 2, the cosine. Pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. See the cosine is 0? Pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. So x will have to be pi over 2 or 3 pi over 2. Maybe I'll try one more, then I'll give you some to try. I'm trying to combine some of the sections we did before together. I never really done it this way. So this is the first time combining sections, 2 or 3 sections together in trig equations. Because I feel people have a headache just with one topic, one section. But I said, you guys doing good here. We'll find out soon how well you're doing. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Oh boy, let's look on the board. Do we see a trig identity that might help me simplify these?
Okay, so
There's a trig identity that says cosine alpha plus beta can be written as what? Cosine alpha, cosine beta, minus sine of alpha, sine of beta.
Should be cosine 3x plus.
Yes, this is your alpha, and this is your beta. So I can take that problem that you see on the top and change that to what? Cosine 3x plus x. And you can write that what? Cosine 4x equals to 0. Just to give you an idea here what's going to happen, this is going to have a lot of answers. This is going to have 8 answers to this question. 8. I might even show you that on the calculator here. Here we go. Ready? I'm going to graph. Oh, God knows what I was graphing there. Here we go. Cosine
Kind of hard to see without the light over.
x. I'm going to move the light. I'll move it. How's that? You see it?
A little more.
More to the right or left.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Oh,
There we go.
just a hair out of the way there. How's that?
Good enough.
I'm going to say cosine x. I want to graph it. But before I do that, because if I go graph it, you're not going to see anything. Why? Color things. I got to make sure I'm in radian mode. Notice I got to go to radian. Hit enter. I'm in radian mode. And that wasn't enough. Let me go to my, is it window? Yes. I want to do from 0 to 2 pi. How high the sine's going to go, by the way, on the cosine? Isn't it to 1? Let me make the y value -1 to 1. I just want, show me just one sine wave, one cosine wave. That's all I want to see. That's what cosine x is. What do you think cosine 4x will look like during that window? If I leave that window open, what do you think you will see? 4 of these shapes, 4 of them. Watch. And under that, let's plot cosine 4x. I should see 4 of these cycles by the time you go from 0 to 2 pi. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm saying, where's the cosine 0? The 4x. There's 1. Can you see it here? There's another one. Which one is it? Yeah. This one. There's 3. There's 4. There's 5. There's 6. There's 7. There's 8 values. So how are we going to find out what the answer is? Since you see 4 of them, that means every 90 degrees it repeats itself. Every pi over 2 repeats itself. So let me look at the first one. When is x going to be 0? Cosine 4x equals 0. Let's look at the unit circle. Where's my unit circle? The cosine is what? Where's the 4x? Where's the cosine equals 0? Cosine is 0 and what? 3 pi over 2. So this thing here, 4x, 4 of them has to be either pi over 2 or 3 pi over 2. But that's 4x. So how do you do it for x then? What do you do? You divide by 4, which will make it what? Pi over 8 plus 3 pi over 8. Because that's 4x. Guess what we got? We got this value. Can you see the picture still? And we got the answer for this. What about that value? What about this value? What about that one? What about this? What about this? What about that? We found the first two numbers. There's 6 more values to add to. Go ahead, somebody start to say something.
They're just revolutions of
You just got to add to that what?
pi.
Because it repeats every 90 degrees. Pi over 2. Right? So the next one is going to be what? It's this value, add to it pi over 2. So what is pi over 8 plus pi over 2? And the next value, 3 pi over 8, because it repeats itself, plus pi over 2 every 90 degrees. Let's see what these numbers. This will be what? 4 pi over 8? 4 and 1, that's 5 pi over 8. And 4 and 3, that's 7 pi over 8. I'm not done. Now we got the first 4. Let's go back to the picture. I found this, 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 and this. How do you get this one? You add pi over 2 to this one, and pi over 2 to that one. Because every 90 degrees it repeats itself. Let's see what the fifth and sixth points are. That's comma. I don't know why I put a plus. It's commas, all commas. Here, that's a plus, but this is a comma. Where's my erase? Maybe that's why I never went to discuss these problems. But I was feeling good. I felt, you guys feeling good? Let's bring them in. So pi over 8, 3 pi over 8, 5 pi over 8, 7 pi over 8. Now let's calculate these numbers. This is 4 and 5, which is what? 11 pi over 8. 4 and 7, oh wait a minute. 4 and 5 is what? 9. The other one is 11. My subconscious. 9 pi over 8, and what's the last one? 11 pi over 8. We have 2 more to add. So we found the first 6 now. Going back to that picture, where'd you go? So we have this. Now I need to find this and this, the last 2. We add pi over 2 to each, the last 2. So finally, here's my answer. After I finish with them, lots of answers. Hopefully you can get that on the test. What's 4 and 9? 13. And 4 and 11?
15.
That's all of them. All these are answer to that equation. If that was a 2x instead of a 4, just to show you, if that was a 2x, was not a 4x, let me go back to this one and fix that one to a 2. What would happen here? Anyone? You'll have 2 full cycles. There's the first one, that's cosine. Now you're going to see 2 more. Here's 1, here's 2. So how many answers are you going to have? 4. So once you find the first 2, you need to add to them what?
Pi over 2.
Not pi over 2, because it repeats itself every what? 180 degrees now. It repeats itself every pi. You add pi to the first two answers, and you have the second group. If you have 3 pi, you'll have 3 full cycles. You have 6 values. So that's what that means. When you see that's the number of cycles, you're going to see by the time you go from 0 to 2 pi, you will have, if it's 2x, you will see 2 sets of them. If it's 4x, you'll see 4 of them, which means you'll have 8 answers for that question. Okay, you want to try a few of them?